Hello everybody, here we are today talking about the Ottawa Senators, the fact they're kind of in a weird spot in the standings right now, seeing where they might end up by the end of the year. So before we get started with it, please make sure to subscribe if you're new to me or hockey, whatever the case may be. Being said, let's get on into it. So Ottawa really hasn't seen any success since 2017, the last time they made the playoffs. In the following 7 seasons, of course, there hasn't been a lot of highlights, with the best season being an 86-point year. And that's tough. And I think that the expectations along this time have been so-so. Some years it's been less expectations. Recently, I feel like it's been more. And I'd say that this year it was even more, as they ended up going out and getting Linus Ullmark, and they thought he could be their starter, and they could actually break through. But through 28 games, they have 28 points, and are not looking probably like a playoff team. So the results are kind of mixed. There are some positives. On one hand, this would be just their second season out of their last 8 seasons to have the ability to pass the 80-point mark. But on the other hand, they still look like they're probably a good ways away from being a playoff team, making fans justifiably frustrated, as we just talked about Anaheim fans being justifiably frustrated in yesterday's video. So it's kind of interesting. So where exactly will Ottawa go in this run? I think if we're looking at something like remaining strength of schedule, maybe they'll stay put. And I think that's probably tough for a lot of fans to hear, but they have the 18th hardest remaining strength of schedule, kind of middle of the pack for a team that's been middle of the pack here in recent years. And I would say that's actually not necessarily a bad thing for this team and for the fan base, primarily because if Ottawa went out there and slipped in the standings, I don't see the front office trying to make a trade to really jumpstart this group, because why would they? They're not going to get a playoff appearance out of it. Why give up assets to try to, finish in the middle there where your draft stock is a little bit worse and whatnot? So if they're middle of the order, maybe they try to go out and say we could use some more wingers, maybe talented wingers, as I think they're top heavy, especially for their forwards and whatnot. And out wide, you might be able to find a bargain. Now it's going to be a little bit harder because Ottawa doesn't have a ton of cap flexibility, but they're still a group that's got a decent amount of draft picks. They've got 3 third-round draft picks and a couple of drafts from now. Maybe they could find a way to move that around. Maybe they could find a way to just make a deal work and get one player that could improve them. Now the question is, would one player, maybe a winger, be enough to get this team into a playoff spot? My answer to this is probably not. You would probably need multiple pieces here. There are some promising signs from this team. They have the 5th lowest expected goals against per 60 at 5-on-5 this year. That is really good for a team that's had a lot of defensive issues over the years. They have a power play unit that is top 5 in the league right now. Wasn't sure if I really expected that. And they've got some of these guys that are their top guys in a really, really good situation. Players that are in their mid-20s, Drake Batherson, Brady Tkachuk, Tim Stützle, that could kind of be leading the charge here. So for an organization that's seeing this and saying, well, some of our best players are guys that aren't even near 30 right now, those are all really promising signs, even though you realize you probably still need to add some more structure around the group. But then we get to the negatives, and I feel like that's where things kind of take a dive in terms of playoff expectations. So this is where we dive into some of the negatives, and the list is a little bit bigger. Linus Ullmark has not had a great year. Things have been much, much better over his past 5 games. He's got like a 940 plus save percentage in that time, so that's good. But this group is winless against teams in the Metro. Currently, according to Natural Stat Trick, they are 0-5-1 against the other division in their conference. That's not ideal, especially when you look at possible tiebreakers and whatnot. And just trying to get a one-up on some teams you might see in the playoffs, especially on your side of the bracket. And then when you look at the teams out west, some of these better sides, they're seeing teams like Vegas and other sides like, of course, Colorado, they're winless against, and that's a big issue because you don't really feel good when you're trying to make the playoffs, seeing your team not do well against really good teams. I know it's a little bit harder to go out there and get wins, but they are just not picking up wins against some of these better sides. Not even star-studded teams, but teams like Vancouver, I think they're winless against, and maybe Edmonton as well. And there was, I think, one other team that's pretty firmly in a playoff spot right now in the Western Conference, where the Senators just aren't in a good spot, and that is troubling to me. They haven't had a lot of lines do very well, either at even strength, and right now I think that it's Giroux, Stützle, and then Batherson that have been kind of their best forwards in the even strength ground, and there's just not a lot of success underneath them, so you worry a little bit. On top of that too, you would be very, very worried if there was an injury to a guy like Thomas Chabot or Nick Jensen, especially because that pairing in particular has played a lot of minutes together for Ottawa this year and has been probably, I'd say, arguably their best pairing. Probably not even arguably, I'd just say it is their best pairing. So you start to feel a little bit afraid, wondering what if something bad happened for this group. So all in all, I look at this team and worry that they might be a couple of injuries away from really sinking in the standings, which is very troubling. And I don't know if they've got the ability to go out there and have a sustained period of success long enough to get them into playoff picture and then be able to stay there. That's really what I worry about with this side. There are meaningful games, plenty of meaningful games left to play for this team, and they aren't out of it right now by any means. They're not too far away from teams like Tampa Bay and New York, but they've got to find a way to capture the ability to beat some of these teams that are close around them, and then maybe even beat some of the teams above them. They just had a big win against a team like Anaheim, but just after doing a video like them and Anaheim kind of back-to-back, it's clear that while they may not be totally far away in the standings, Anaheim would be a little bit more okay with, oh, our year went sideways and we got a good draft selection, whereas Ottawa, I think it's more of, we've got our guys, we know some of these young guys are very good, we've got them in long-term deals, and we have been close-ish before. We aren't happy about maybe being a side that finishes with 79 points or 82 points. They want to see the graph go up, the standings go up. They want to be either on the brink or right there to make the postseason, which is kind of a story that's getting a little bit old, but it is what it is. People have talked about big trades possibly coming for this team. Maybe Kachuk, that certainly would be interesting. You heard all that talk about the Rangers. That would be really, really wild. But I don't think that we'll see a big trade for this organization in terms of shipping guys out unless they got an absolute haul. So where to now for Ottawa? The future is certainly in their hands in deciding that, but I think that we will see them miss for an 8th straight year. And I'm hoping that they can actually make the playoffs because this would be a fun bunch. Got an interesting roster compared to some other teams, a side we haven't seen it in a while in a playoff picture. And even if they were a first-round exit, they would still be a big jolt for the fan base, as the Atlantic features multiple teams that haven't made the playoffs in quite a while now. And unfortunately, I think that trio that's almost in that triangle, that Bermuda Triangle, if you will, of hockey, excluding Toronto, might be missing out on playoff hockey yet again. So anyway, that being said, what are your thoughts on the Ottawa Senators for this year? Do they make the playoffs? Do they miss the playoffs? Are they a team that is in the 80-point range, 70-point range, 90-point range? Let me know those thoughts down below in the comments. Also, please make sure to like this video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you're new. Everybody stay safe. Have a great night. And Eagle of Hockey, all right. Goodbye, Brigadiers and Brigadettes. This is your captain signing off. Have a great night.